Payal, thank you so much for joining me today. I am so thrilled to be in conversation with you.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yes, so I have your gorgeous book over here, Ria and the Blood of the Nectar, which was generously sent in by Mango and Marigold Publishing Press, which I'm very thankful for. So, first of all, because this chat would mostly be viewed by my Indian community of readers, could you
Yes.
begin with telling us a little about yourself?
Yes. So I am born and bred Bombayite, Mumbaiite. I moved to the US only 8 years ago. So I
Right,
lived there, did my schooling there, university there.
right.
Yeah, had loved to read as so many of us do, but never ever thought that I would write a book. Um, like it just didn't even occur to me that's a possibility.
Yeah,
And so I studied management, and I went and got my master's done in business
yeah,
management, and
yeah.
still like just didn't feel like I was doing what I wanted to do. And then I ended up getting into magazine publishing because I wanted to do something creative.
Right.
And so I went into magazine publishing, and then basically a year in, I was very frustrated.
Mhm.
This is when I was about 23 years old. I was very frustrated just writing these articles that the editor was telling me to write, because that's how it works in magazine publishing. You have the theme of the month. If it's summer, then you're like thematically around summer,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
things like that. And I was like, I want to write something that I want to write. What that was, I had no idea. Um, and so it was like out of sheer frustration one day that I, switched on my laptop on a Saturday morning, and I was like, I'm just going to write something. And I wrote two paragraphs, and they happened to be about an 8-year-old girl who runs off into these forbidden woods behind her house,
Right,
and something magical, mysterious happens with the
right,
tree, and
right,
she gets like freaked out and she runs out, but she's also very curious about what happened.
right.
And I wrote like maybe 200 words, and
Mhm.
and I was just like my mind was blown. I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to, I had this random idea, and I created a scene out of it, and I just like loved that
Right,
feeling and experience. I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. And so then I um, wrote out the plot and teased it out, and then I ended up working on this idea.
wow, that's like almost like a TED talk, you know. You started out with something else and you're doing something else, and who knows where you're gonna go
Yes.
from here. So,
Well, I
uh,
hope it's in the realm of writing more books. That I will tell you. I
yeah,
hope that that's
yes,
the future, that I keep
we'll
writing.
keep our fingers crossed that very soon we see you on that, very acclaimed New York Times best-selling list.
Yeah.
I think that
Oh,
that
I will.
that should be the dream and goal, I think, of all authors. So why not?
Yes, yes. That's the
Absolutely.
pinnacle game.
Yeah. So I wanted to, touch base upon with the fact that when I started reading this book, I had very little idea. Like I did not know much about it. I knew that there's an author called Payal Doshi. She's writing a middle grade Indian, South Asian representation. That is all that I knew. And I went into this fairly without checking out reviews or anything else for that matter. And then I started reading, and your world and your characters completely sucked me in. And two things that I realized then. One, why did I not get such books while growing up? Like I'm 21-year old right now. I have grown up reading Harry Potter, and while of course Harry Potter is not bad, but it doesn't have Indian representation as much as you would like, or for that matter, Narnia. So there was a lack of representation, which I think you also mentioned somewhere at the back in the acknowledgements or in the about section, which is why you kind of also wanted to touch base on this. So how does it feel for you to be like, one of the first, if not the first to, to go out there and write? Because from what I understand, you're not an NRI, you're an Indian born, Indian race. So this isn't like Roshni Chokshi or other of those NRI authors. So how does it feel to be, one of those first people to go out there and that to do something like this, which is in the realm of fantasy, not contemporary or literary fiction? I think we have so many of those.
It's so cool to talk to you about this, because I say this in interviews, and I'm like, educating them that, I'm writing this book, which is fun, which is middle grade, which we just didn't have any of that as an Indian person. We have amazing Indian authors. They're all adult literary fiction. One of the reasons why I never thought about writing, because you had the Arundhati Roys and your Amitav Ghosh, and as a 12-year-old or even 8-year-old, I was like, oh my God, no way. That's not, I'm not that.
I mean, as a 21-year-old, I still run away from them. So.
Yeah, and it's like, the way they write, and, they get so philosophical, and they really, tackle all these massive. I'm just like, I just wanted to write like a fun, happy story. And so I never thought I could do it. But anyway, so you literally touched on every single point. It wasn't the reason why I wrote, like, I want to be the first person to write. That wasn't it. Now I feel very proud. That I've been able to achieve that. But going in, like I said, I was just trying to find something that made me really happy. And then I discovered it. And kind of, side note is that, and I mentioned this, always, because I think it's so important, apart from the fact that we just didn't have any books with Indian characters growing up as children's books. And I grew up in the 90s. I was born in 85. So I grew up with only white books, and loved them. And Harry Potter as I grew older. But we just never saw ourselves. And honestly, to be really honest and frank with you, at the time, the internet was not this big thing and stuff like that. I didn't even think, like, why am I not represented? It was just like, you're not there. I mean,
own voices is like a very internet-induced ideology in itself. That's true.
Yeah. And so I didn't feel bad that I wasn't being represented. I didn't think about it. It's not that I didn't feel that. It didn't occur to me. It's like a book. Obviously, they're white characters. That's it. And so the whole first draft was written with white characters. Ria was Rose. Rohan was Brian. We lived in the English countryside because, we grew up on Enid Blyton, grew up on that, right? So they had, they were eating like scones and, everything was British. But the crux of the story was the same. Like the brother was going to go missing. Everything was white. And drawn from books I've read, not like I've ever gone and lived in London or anything like that. And then there was a writing teacher in Bombay. I'd gone for a writing workshop. And she was just like, I read the first chapter, and she was just like, she looks at me almost annoyed, defeated, like, why are you not writing about Indian characters? Like, she literally used that tone. And I remember thinking, oh, how rude. Like, who cares if it's Indian or not? I mean, tell me if my writing is good, I'm creating a scene and all that. And I was not the only one she had that comment for. And it was later that I went home, and I was quite irritated that I didn't, she didn't give me any nice positive feedback. She was just harping about the fact that I didn't have an Indian character. I was like, why didn't I though? But why didn't I? And that's the thing, we don't realize it. Now things are changing. So there is a great deal of realization, but I never thought at the beginning to write about my own experiences and just my own, like, I tell, when I do these events and I'm talking to an author who's particularly white, and I'm like, imagine you sit to write a book and you're like, of course I'm going to write about an Indian kid. Like, it's so ridiculous to think like that. And yet that is how I thought, and so many of us have thought. And, I'm not the only Indian author who has had this experience. It's a very general experience. And so that was the moment that it just changed for me. And because until then I was just writing, whatever I wanted to write about, it wasn't directed to any particular thing. And then when that realization hit, I said, I'm going to write a story that I would have loved to read as a kid. And even frankly, as an adult, I love fantasy. I love Harry Potter. I love Narnia. I loved his Dark Materials. Like, I love fantasy. So I'm going to write a fantasy book, a fun book, because damn it, Indian kids should get to have fun, because we have a great life too. All of our stories usually are portrayed as pain stories, struggle stories, immigration stories, war stories, poverty stories, and I'm not denying that those are very important. Exactly. But you have to have a balance. All of us from every culture carry the hardships of that culture and that heritage and their history,
Yeah.
but there's also joy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And why can't Indian kids, like my idea was like, why can't Harry Potter be Indian?
Yeah.
Right? When
Yeah.
we all read Harry Potter, none of us went like, but we should get one Harry Potter movie. We were just like, hell yeah, we take this, right? Why don't we do that?
I remember the only time when I actually realized that there was Indian characters were in the fourth film, when
Yeah, when the girls came.
yeah, when they like walked into the Yule Wall. And then I remember all of us, like when we grew a little older, we were like, why did they wear such badly, designed lehengas? Like, why couldn't they have worn something more gorgeous? Like, who designed
Right?
them?
Who
Yeah,
designed it? And then still didn't go like, but like, why wasn't Parvati like a main character or like a
yeah,
second?
yeah,
It just doesn't. We are very happy to be like, that's oh, first
yeah,
I was so happy to see Parvati and Padma when I read it for the first time. I was like, oh,
yeah,
what?
yeah.
And I
There's
was
an
very happy to get that little tiny mention of
yeah,
Indians in this world, Harry Potter.
yeah.
And sure, but come on.
We need
We
more.
were in 2021.
Yeah,
We're like a billion strong.
yeah,
Okay. We are
yeah.
we are not a minority population. Sorry.
We're like
We
the
are over,
second most largest population in the world. Yeah,
right? And you can count the number of books with
yeah,
Indian characters in children's fiction of joyful stories.
yeah, yeah.
And
True.
I'm like, that needs to change because I want my kids, I want your generation, my generation, the upcoming generation
Yeah,
to it's really cool to see yourself in books. Like
represented.
when you
Yeah,
see it, it's like one of those things that when you don't have something, you don't realize. The second you have it, you're like, oh, I can't believe I've been missing out on not having this.
right,
And I'm like, we need more Indian kids to see themselves in books.
right.
We need them to have like do really cool things, like have
Mhm,
magic and go save realms and be the
mhm.
hero. And
Yeah,
most importantly for me, it was that I wanted to write a story in which, of course, India and our culture and all of that is celebrated, but at the same time, it's not the forefront of the novel. I'm not
right,
writing a book to educate anybody about Indian culture. Personally,
right,
I cannot. It's so versatile and diverse, and it's not my. That's not what I want to do. I don't want
right,
any teacher to be like, let's learn about India.
right.
But I want uh, I want to show that just like I grew up reading books with white characters and them being white and their culture was just one part of who they were.
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah,
focus on the fact that it was why they were
yeah,
white and what,
yeah.
it was just details. But
Details.
what I
Yeah,
connected with was that character and that personality. And
right.
I rooted for that character, like rooted for Harry, rooted for Hermione, like, rooted for Luna.
Yeah,
And it was irrelevant what they physically look like.
look like.
And
Yeah,
so yeah, so I want readers who are, Indians and South Asians across the world and in
of
India, of
course.
course, to read this book, be
Yeah,
like, oh, see
yeah,
myself, and they can
yeah,
maybe pick out certain things
yeah.
that I've mentioned that they've experienced, so they know exactly what I'm
Absolutely.
talking
Yeah,
about. And of course, then see themselves as these really cool characters. And then for the non-Indian population to read the story and go like, well, I fully connect. Like I may not look like Ria, but that's
yeah.
how we grew up. We read every book where we didn't look like,
Look
and
like.
it didn't matter. We turned out to be
Right,
book nerds and
right,
love books. So it clearly doesn't matter if you don't look like the person on the cover.
right,
And so them to realize that, because so
right.
many times I have people who
Absolutely.
very well intentioned will be like, oh, I know an Indian family because I live in the States. Or, I know an Indian family in my neighborhood, like they love it. I'm like, yeah, oh, like yes, but
Abs-
also your own son, perhaps, if he or she, if he loves reading fantasy, will love the book too.
Right.
And I would like them to forget that they are Indian,
Mhm.
because and go on this adventure of enjoying the story for the characters and savor the details that they about a different culture,
Mhm.
if they want to do so along the way. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so it's really cool. It's really like I don't think there's another Indian like from India, born and raised and not an NRI, who's
Yeah.
writing middle grade fiction, happy books. So I
Yeah.
hope we
So
see more.
yeah,
Really
so
cool.
that's what I was thinking, because when I was reading it, I was trying to go back and look into my shelf, like what are the Indian books that I have which are by international authors. And while I had Nisha Sharma, Sajni Patel, and lots of amazing authors, but all of them are NRIs, or all of them don't write for fantasy or for middle grade. So I was like, wow, this is
And has a
perhaps
book on characters set in India. Like
yeah,
she's from Darjeeling, she's not from
yeah,
New Jersey.
right. So I absolutely loved how you included Darjeeling, and because Darjeeling is in West Bengal and I stay in Kolkata. So, and
Ah,
there's a lots of mention of Kolkata in here as well. So, and you're from Bombay. So,
yes.
and of course, anybody who knows, has lived in Bombay or has lived in Kolkata would argue that they're quite pretty similar in a lot of different ways. So, so what was your experience like? Like, how was the research process like? Because everything that you've mentioned is extremely detailed. It's very visual. The world feels as if it's a first-hand account. So, I mean, I'm assuming that you have been here, or if you've not been to Darjeeling and or West Bengal, then how did you, able to do justice to the setting and the world building?
Yeah. So when I decided to write this book and I had this epiphany that, it's going to be India, I
Right.
knew from the get-go that I'm going to set it in Darjeeling.
Okay.
Why? I had never been there before. But obviously know about
Of
Darjeeling,
course.
living in India. But I wanted to write
How can
about
we not drink Darjeeling tea and not know about Darjeeling? Yeah.
yeah, and like it's so much for Indians, it's so much more also than just tea. I mean, of
Yeah.
course, it's the tea plantation. This is
Tea.
beautiful hill station,
Beautiful.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
the toy train. Like we
Yeah.
know all these things just like
Right.
growing up.
Right.
And and so I knew it was Darjeeling because mainly I wanted to set the India part of this book in a really gorgeous, beautiful part of the country that is
Right.
underrated, that people don't know about. Because again, this is a very simple story. It's a fun story. It's your sister going after her brother into this fantasy land, and all these fantastical things happen. It's a simple story.
Right.
But at the same time, I wanted to break certain Indian stereotypes doing it,
Mm-mm.
because unfortunately, that is what you don't again set to do it. But just as a writer as an Indian writer, who's, again, we're not that many of us, you just carry the burden of that. And I'm like, I really don't want my book to be inauthentic for my
Yeah.
Indian readers, especially. And stereotypical, absolutely not.
Absolutely.
And so I chose Darjeeling because everyone thinks of India, they will think, either of the
Rajasthan,
slumdog
Delhi. Yeah.
millionaire,
Yeah.
Rajasthan, Delhi, Bombay, the
Bombay.
slums and the
Yeah.
crap, and all exists. I'm not saying it
Yes.
doesn't exist. But
Yeah.
we have such beauty as well.
Right.
No one thinks that.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I want to set it in Darjeeling.
Yes.
Because of that reason.
Yeah.
And it also ties into the theme, like the underlying theme of the book, which is just very floral. Even Astranthia is very
Right.
nature centered, and Darjeeling has that too. So anyway, so I wrote this book. I researched, did all the typical means of research, which was like scouring the internet for like travel blogs.
Right.
And I really relied on Darjeeling's official government website to make sure I got the trees right, what the flora, fauna there. I was like zooming into Google Maps, like you can't imagine. That, okay, I was getting the topography right, like, okay, I can put a lake here, the school can possibly be here, like things like that.
Right.
I bought books on Darjeeling and did all of those things. And there you go. I have
The wall was created. Yeah.
Right. And I was like, great. So now I'm ready to query my book. And I was like, but I should visit Darjeeling just once before I send this out. And so I was visiting India and I told my mom, like, let's go on a trip, like just you and me. And so we went to Darjeeling for 4 days.
Oh.
It was just an amazing experience. It was so beautiful. I went in December. It was just
perfect time. Yeah.
Perfect time. It was everything I wanted it to be. But then I realized that I got many, many details wrong.
Yeah.
And I was like, so to begin with, initially I had said her village in Darjeeling, Darjeeling city.
Right.
Now, when I go to Darjeeling, I realized that the city is like fully winding up on the mountain. And the city is like, it's that narrow.
Yeah.
Because it's all winding.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, shouldn't they be a cricket ground for them to play cricket? Because it's like, even when you're driving on the roads, it's like, it's so narrow.
Narrow, yeah.
So I asked that tour guide, I said, so, is there a lake close by? Because Ria goes to a lake to work out her
Yeah.
issues and
Yeah.
riddles and stuff. And he's like, yeah, well, that's down at the foothill of the hill. You'll find it. I said, how far is that? He's like about 2-hour car ride. I was like, oh, and here I have walking to the lake, and I was like, okay. And I'm like, so that's the closest they'll have any flat land. Yeah. So he said there's this place called Mirik. So I actually went to Mirik, drove down to Mirik, which was 2 hours south, but it was on the foothills. But luckily, it had the same the feeling that I wanted to evoke.
Yeah.
Still see the Himalayas at the back. You could see the tea plantations, but it was flat. So they had a lake. They have the lake that I mentioned. There's in the book is directly copied from that, inspired from that lake.
Yeah.
There is enough flat pieces of land where they can go play cricket and do things. But then I went to Darjeeling. I noticed that the houses were so bright. Everybody had such beautiful colored houses, bright blues, bright pinks, bright oranges, bright yellows. Beautiful pots lining the houses. These are things that how much of a research you do, There's small little details that you just don't end up picking up. And then I asked him, what do you all eat every day? And the thukpa came up. And I remember I had put in because I'm Gujarati. So when I read this book, I had made her have dal and bhaji and and then it's not like they don't eat that, but traditional, because theirs is so inspired by Nepali cuisine as well. And momos and the thukpa. So that didn't occur to me because I just use my, and I know I wouldn't be wrong because I'm sure there might be someone there who might have eaten that one day, kind of a thing. So whenever I'm talking to, writers, I'm like, if you're writing about a place that you haven't visited, then before you send it out for publication, at least make sure you go and visit it. Because so many of these vital details, small but still important, I got wrong. So then I finished it, and so it was amazing to have gone there and.
No, absolutely stunning, and I think it shows in the book as well. Every time you read about the descriptions or just about how you're building up your world, even if it's something that has to not do with Astrantia, as in before Ria goes into that world, even the world that is just Mirik or Darjeeling in itself is so beautifully well done. So now moving a little forward and talking about Ria and Rohan and their complicated relationship. So where do you draw that from? Do you have a sibling, or how is that coming all along? Because it was so interesting to see them I think they're twins, and they are not really friends with one another. I mean, they really want to be friends. Ria really wants to be friends, but we're very not sure about Rohan's intentions and motives until quite end in the book. And then I felt but now he has to be grateful because Ria is there and she saved the day. But what if this did not happen? What then? So could you talk a little about the whole equation that you've kind of created here, and where did you base that from?
So I have a sibling. I have a sister. She's 4 years older than I am. It's just the two of us, and we definitely have had our sibling love and rivalry through the years. Especially when we were, in our teens. Definite love-hate relationship. And now as we're older, I mean, I can't imagine life without her. She's my best friend. But that tug of siblings, you just, one moment you really want to kill each other, and the next moment, if someone does something to them, however mad you are, you will draw blood for them. And so. And it's such a universal experience of siblings, world over, which is just what it is. And so I wanted to, draw on that and, explore that relationship. And I also think that, one of the reasons why I love middle grade is because it's this time in our life where, you're 11, 12. This is the age when you start figuring things out. You start becoming aware of the world around you, how you look, how you want to look, who your friends are, who you want your friends to be. Why are my parents fighting? What's up, with something else? And someone is bullying you, or you are the bully, or you are there's so many things that are happening, and you are becoming hyper aware of the world. And and I think this is a time when you also become, selfish in the sense that because you're literally laying the foundations for who you're going to be. So you're so tuned into all of these, and you're thinking more about yourself. And that's kind of where Ria and Rohan have landed up. Like they were, they're twins, so they grew up together. They come from, again, this is the other thing. I didn't want Ria to come from a big Indian family, which again, many people assume Indians have this big Indian family. She also has a mom who is not the quintessential Indian mom that we see in movies and in books, like
in Karan Johar films,
in Karan Johar films, right? Come, eat, just the most selfless giving.
And do the aarti.
Yeah, exactly, right? No, and it's the fact is that not every Indian mom is like that in India, right? Because obviously. And so Ria's mom is certainly not that. And so she comes from a family that is a bit dysfunctional, which is also, something I wanted to talk about in this book, because it is important for kids to see that they may not relate exactly, they may relate, but that at that age, we're all going through so many different things. And so anyway, so she carries that baggage. She really wants to know what's happened to her dad. And it's, it's shrouded in mystery. No one in the house talks about it.
Right.
And up until now, she and Rohan were a team, but now they're 11. Rohan is, generally just the more extroverted kid between the two of them.
Right.
He's getting more, he has more friends. He's getting more interested in cricket. And he's like, he's the kind of personality who has accepted that we just don't, we're not going to get any more information about dad, about Babas. It's like, you move on. And he's moving on, but she's holding on to it. That's her personality. So she's not just creating more and more walls around her because she's not getting the love and affection from her mother. She's not getting the answers from her. Now her brother seems to have abandoned her because he's off with his friends and he's doing the things. And doesn't that happen in like
it happens, of course.
You're like, my life, I got to do my own thing, want to be with my friends and do all of these different things. And just because she is introverted, doesn't have all of that. She feels abandoned. So there's all of that complication. But at the end of the day, when something happens to him, she's not going to let any stone go unturned to find him.
Absolutely.
That's such a, it's just, family is.
It is like that. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. The way the book ended, I mean, I can't but, help and try and see if you have the manuscript behind you for the second book. I like how it's all covered.
I just printed it out.
Wow, yeah. So I was wondering, because, you've anyway given us like one exclusive reveal of the second book's first chapter. So I'm kind of very excited to see where it's going. And I was wondering if you could tell us about what's going to happen next, one. And second, how many books are we expecting? Like, is this supposed to be a trilogy or like more than a trilogy? So where are we looking at?
So I'll answer the second question first. So it's going to be a trilogy.
Okay.
And the funny thing about that chapter is that my publisher was like, so the way it works in publishing is, especially in the US, I would assume it's the same in India also, is that when you sell your first book, they don't care if you've written 100 sequels after that. Because if your first book doesn't do well, they are not going to take you up on it.
Yeah.
So I anyways was just focused on the first book. And when I sold it and they accepted it, I said that, it can be a series, and I wrote it to open it as, if there's a sequel, I can continue a story.
Yeah.
But beyond the first book, I myself had not thought about it because it was so new to me, this whole process. And and so then as we were in production of this book, I was finishing edits on this book with my editor and stuff like that. And we were like close to the cover, I think. And that's when my publisher's like, by the way, we want to buy the whole series. I was like, so happy. I mean, you can't imagine. And she's like, so how many books and blah, blah, blah. And so that's when I started to think about it. And so then I was like, okay, we do a trilogy. And she says, okay, give me the first chapter. And I was like, what do you mean first chapter? She's like, I want to put it in the book. So I had no idea what the sequel was going to be. And here I had to write a whole chapter. I don't know if that'll be the first chapter, by the way, but it's an excerpt from the book. So it should be there somewhere in the book, in the beginning somewhere. And I was so stressed about it, but it forced me to like think of what the sequel is and then just the whole overarching arc of the
Right,
trilogy.
right, right.
So now I know the main points,
Yeah.
but that first chapter was written under duress. um, Try to keep it such that I can actually utilize all of the things that I mentioned in
Right.
this. I had nothing written, nothing. So anyway, I got that done. And then I went off from there. So I just finished the first draft of the
Mhm.
sequel. And the reason why I'm saying all of this is like, don't hold me to every single thing I say. Because when by the time it gets published, maybe half the things that I that are in this book may not make it. So just that's the reason why I'm saying this. Anyway, so I've written the first draft, which is terrible. It's a hot mess. But for me, as my process, getting the whole thing out, like, you know,
Mhm.
at least I have this to work with. But what I can say for sure is that the sequel is a lot more darker, a lot more bigger.
Yeah.
There is a hint in the first book
Yeah. Yeah.
about perhaps a mega villain in
Yeah.
the works, and
Right.
so, you know, that villain might make an appearance. We have some loose ends to tie still from book one, and we will be exploring
Of
that.
course. Yeah.
So at this present moment, it's bigger, it's darker. There are going to be more kids, newer kids in the book.
Ah.
We're going to see a lot more Ria and Rohan, which I'm excited about, because in this book, like, spoiler alert, he does survive the first one. But so in this book, they are together. And it's an
Yeah.
interesting thing because I get to navigate, you know, them being in Astranthia and Darjeeling, but mostly Astranthia now because they have a lot of cleanup to do in Astranthia. And
Right. Right.
we see a lot of Astranthia and their life there now.
Mhm.
But there's a big, as you in the first, I think in the excerpt that I've said, there's a, yes, there is a war coming
Yes.
that they have to prepare for,
Yeah.
and someone we know in book one will die. That's all I can say.
I have my guesses.
Could have taken that picture of your face right there. You're like, okay, this is, you know, this is all sequel stuff. Yeah. But that's it. Yeah.
I can make my guesses and I have my guesses, but I'm not going to say it out here because it would give a
Because if you
potential.
guess right, I'll just be like, oh no, oh shoot.
Yeah, and you probably wouldn't even be able to tell me that, you know, like,
No, I
okay.
won't tell you because yes, I know, but I would be like, maybe I have to rethink my whole plot if someone can guess so easily who's going to die.
Yeah. So absolutely. So when is this coming out? Next year? Are we expecting a 2022 release or later?
Currently, it's a fall 2022 release.
Okay. So between then and now, people who loved your book want to explore something similar, or maybe, you know, some books that you would like to recommend to people, to your readers who've read. So what would they be?
Well, okay, so I'm gonna highlight some debuts. So
Okay.
if you like, because you know all the classics, they don't need any more publicity.
Right.
We do.
Of course.
So yes, so if you like Ria and the Blood of the Nectar, so you like high fantasy, then let's see, I have some here. So we have The Verdigris Pawn by
Yeah, I've seen this.
we have, it's going to take me too long to go through it, but there's The Last Shadow Warrior by Sam Subiti.
Okay.
Those two are really, really great fantasy books.
Fantasy. Yeah.
Then if you like
Maybe let's say middle grade
contemporary, there are two books that I absolutely love. One is Clues. Clues in the Universe by Christina Lee is a fantastic book.
Right.
Thanks a Lot Universe by
yeah. I have read that. Loved it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Fantastic book that has South Asian representation done phenomenally well in one of the side characters. And I messaged and I let Chad know. I was like, you know, I very rarely read books where I'm like, you've done such a good job in describing the Indian character that he has in the book. And then another book that's just I absolutely love is A Place to Hang the Moon. It's a
Mm-mm.
historical
Right,
fiction
right.
book, which is like a little like a soft blanket that around yourself. It's
Absolutely.
just a sweet, heartfelt book. And a novel in verse that I really enjoyed is Alone by Megan Freeman and Unsettled by Reem Faruqi. These
Okay.
both of these novels in verse.
Those are some really interesting choices. I've read only one from here, but I'm definitely going to go back and quickly go to my Goodreads and add all of them, which is like a never-ending,
Never
stack of TBR.
Yeah, it's
So
like you have a TBR, like a physical one, and then the Goodreads one is
Goodreads
just a
one, yeah, and then for reviewers, I think we have a NetGalley one and an Edelweiss's one for those who read digital books. So it's like an in endless review of books. So
endless. But
yes,
it's such amazing work, you know. I just want to say that it's so exciting for me to do this, especially with another Indian like book lover, bookstagrammer, influencer. Like it makes
right,
me so proud. Like I feel like I never had that growing up because
of
the
course,
community hadn't developed as much, and internet was. I mean,
yeah.
it was there. Not like I was there in the beginning of the internet. Uh, I'm still, yeah, I'm like right at the beginning of the millennials. So hello.
Millennials, yeah, yeah,
But the book community was still very nascent
yeah,
and
of
like
course, of course,
practically non-existent in India. Maybe here it was a little more, but
yeah,
it's so awesome to see like
right.
Asian creators on social media
On
doing
social
such
media,
awesome work,
yeah, right.
and there's so many, and because of you guys, so many of people in India get access to these books
Books,
because
yeah, yeah,
like my book is not published in India. It's like my
right.
dream to be published in India, but it's a whole other beast that
Of course, that needs to be tamed. Yeah,
yeah. Yes.
of course,
And I really hope that it gets there one day. But
right.
until then, this is,
The
I,
medium, yeah,
so grateful because of people like you. They get to see it and
yeah.
hopefully
No,
more
I'm
of it.
absolutely honored, and I would definitely be, talking and gushing a little bit more about Ree and her brother and Mishti Dadi and just everybody else. I loved all of those characters so much. I love the Narnia-inspired sort of world that you've created here, and how beautifully it represents Darjeeling, which again I have a soft corner for because I'm from Calcutta. So this book definitely, deserves more audience, and I hope that it finds more. And by the time the sequel comes, a little bit more people in India also discover it and pick it up. So thank you for your time. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Chetan.